So, was this a first major step to tackle climate change or just a big, giant disappointment? Well, joining me to discuss all of this is Bloomberg's Alex Morales, who was at Copenhagen, and also Mark Spelman, who's the global head of strategy at Accenture. Welcome to you both. So, Alex, first of all, you've been speaking to the likes of Melinda Kimball, who is the U.S.'s chief negotiator on Kyoto back in 1997, and others. What's the general reaction that you're getting?
Well, Melinda Kimball said if the goal of this conference was to save the planet, we certainly didn't achieve that. She called it a limited outcome. And I think that's the general sense. People who are in the even people who are in the negotiating room, Ed Miliband he said it's not a perfect deal. But what they're calling it is a step in the right direction.
Okay. And Mark, what's been your reaction? Was this a big failure?
No, I think it was all about momentum. If you look at this relative to, say, what happened with the Kyoto process, we're actually moving fast already. And I think that, particularly from a business perspective, you have to look that this is an issue which is going to run for the next sort of 20 years or so. We've definitely made some progress. I think the +2 degrees C is important. The 100 billion in 2020 is important. But obviously, there's a lot of further progress that's going to be required. I think some of the technical details were worked out in Copenhagen. But in terms of the big issues around things like targets, financing, measurements, still a lot to be done.
Alex, should we have expected much from this meeting? I mean, we are talking about 192 countries trying to reach a consensus.
Well, certainly when you have that many people in a room trying to come to consensus, it's very difficult. I think when 119 world leaders said they were turning up to the conference, everyone thought, well, that'll focus the minds, and because 119 leaders aren't going to turn up to a conference and wish to go home with nothing to put on the table. The problem was there were lots of debates in the first week of the conference about process, and they didn't make any progress on the core issues. So when the leaders came, they didn't have much to do. They didn't have much put in front of them, and so they actually had to get down to the hard job of negotiating themselves, which is something that envoys normally do.
Let's talk about business, Mark. I mean, do businesses feel any wiser after this event?
Well, I think that this is all about really the true cost of externalities. So the way I like to describe it is that ultimately business has to understand that we're going to pay for carbon just like we pay for wages. And so that becomes, I think, a critical issue that business is going to have to face up to, because what it's going to drive is much greater productivity, much greater innovation going forward, because we're going to have to find ways of, if you like, managing things like design, production, distribution, marketing in a much more efficient way to pay for those true externalities.
But has that process that you're describing gained momentum as a result of Copenhagen?
Yes, I think it's undoubtedly raised people's awareness, but clearly this is something that's going to run and run and run. I think some businesses see this as an opportunity for greater differentiation and advantage, and I think some are very much caught up in the downturn.
In a nutshell, why is this so important? I mean, why was this the result of this Copenhagen meeting, and why is this issue so important to the business world?
Well, because ultimately this is about acceleration to a low-carbon economy, and that is a disruptive change for business. And so business has to take this into account. The key question is around speed and scale. And so the reason why there's uncertainty is because business is not clear about speed and scale. But the big issue is that we are definitely moving towards a low-carbon economy. That is not going to go away, and that's very important for business.
Mark Spelman of Accenture and Alex Morales of Bloomberg News.